Well, I think that if you adopt a policy of live and let live, you can get along. And I mean, I have also had my reverses. I was more or less kicked out of Lake House after 35 years in 1996. I've been editor of the Daily News for 14 years, and I was summarily removed, and I was called the editorial consultant for the Associated Newspapers of Ceylon. And for 1 year or more, I sat in an office. I had absolutely nothing to do. I got paid. And I spent my time writing articles for the foreign press. And one day they charge sheeted me for misusing company stationery, for taking a computer printout of something I had written for the Far Eastern Economic Review. And that's a long story, but eventually, although I think that I was sacked, in reality, they paid me to resign. And I was invited to come over to the Sunday Island, so I continued in journalism. So this kind of thing happens. And strangely, I still remember my friend D.C. Karunaratna, who is now the number 2 in the Lankadipa. In 1972, when Lake House was being taken over, I still remember Karu telling me, Manik, you know, after this, with every election, there will be a convulsion in this place. And that is exactly what happened. After Lake House was taken over, each time there was an election, there was a convulsion. There was patronage given, new people were put, because politicians have a very vested interest in the media, and they wanted their loyalists in, they wanted perceived enemies out. And
but even outside that fray, you've survived. You've been critical
in the sense that I suppose, although it sounds immodest to say so, I had enough professional skill not to want for a job. The moment I went out of Lake House, I was invited first by Upali and then by Vijay newspapers running the Times to join them. Even when I was editor of the Daily News, Upali Vijayawardena asked me to be the first editor of the Island when he was setting it up. So I never wanted for a job, and I always had foreign strings. I was the AP stringer here. I used to write for a number of years for the Far Eastern Economic Review. I used to work for Voice of America. I did a lot of strings, and probably earned that way more than my salary. So that was, but strangely, as I told Mr. Vijayawardena one day, that many of the capable people, most of the capable people in Lake House had a foreign string, because the pay was not all that good, and if they didn't have it, they might have drifted off to other employment.
I want to talk about post-war Sri Lanka's media development as well. There seems to be, on the one hand, the terrain for greater emphasis on not just the freedom of expression and media freedom, but media's industries development across Sri Lanka, and particularly in the north and the east, where there are certainly media establishments, but they have been decimated and deracinated by war, and they are both increasing their footprint as well as the readership. Is this something that is important to you?
The media is present in Jaffna. At the time I started work in Lake House in the early 60s, the Tinakaran was printed in Colombo and distributed to Jaffna. So was the Veerakesari. Now there are some newspapers that print in Jaffna itself, but there was a time when the LTT wouldn't permit that. Now, given that this contention between the security forces and the LTT has ended in those areas, I would think that there would be more space for the media industry to both print, electronic, broadcast, the whole works to develop in those places, and I hope that will happen. The good thing about it is that there is already a presence, so you don't have to start from scratch, and there is room to develop.
In terms of where the industry has gone over 5 years, I was witness yesterday to another senior editor, Lakshman Gunasekara, suggesting that Sri Lanka may be behind the curve in this respect, in the sense that the decline of newspapers in the West and the rise of, say, online journalism, both citizen journalism as well as established news organizations going to the web. But he suggested that this is inevitable in Sri Lanka as well. Now, you have an experience of 5 decades of working in print. How are you grappling with, both as a person, as a journalist, and as the editor of a newspaper, and a very large one at that, with the challenges as well as the potential for online media?
Well, one thing is that it's a very handy tool.
Yeah.
I mean, in the old days, we would have to go to the library and look up something.
Which is not a bad thing.
Which is not a bad thing at all. But now, I mean, you go to the internet and you can get information on any conceivable thing.
Which is also not always a good thing.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, many people, many of us, me included, we like our faith in a dictionary. Yeah. We think if it's there in Wikipedia, for instance, that it's correct. But that need not be so.
Yeah.
There are some things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And but also today, that's a very powerful tool where somebody could get so much which they would never be able to discover for themselves. Last Sunday I saw a story in one of the papers about a freshwater jellyfish, and now if I was writing a story like that from the time I was a young reporter in the 60s, I would have had to talk to various people, and in those days, getting a trunk call to Anuradhapura wouldn't have been easy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you book it at 9 o'clock this morning, and you might be lucky if you get it tomorrow. Now with mobile phones and the internet, everything is so easy. So hopefully that will help us to produce a better product. And you see internet usage now in the pages of newspapers.
Sure.
Definitely.
Sure. But it doesn't take away, and this is something that we discussed before the program began, the need for and the lack of good writing, good journalists.